AC, PLC, come on. AC, PLC, that's right. AC, PLC, Hillsborough, get your library card for free. AC, PLC, AC, PLC, come on. AC, PLC, come check out your local library. Say what? A library card? Come and get it, man, it ain't that hard. Proof of Hillsborough County address, photo ID, yeah, and we'll do the rest. No headaches or no stress. No DJ Khaled, but we the best. Library card for free, that's a major key. About to break it down now and you will see. Talking about lit? Yeah, we got lit. Customer service, yeah, we bout it. Overdrive, Hoopla for your ebooks. RB, digital magazines, look. Wanna learn a new language? Mango. Korean or Spanish in your brain, bro. You thought we were just books, but you didn't know what the library offers, so insane, yo. AC, PLC, come on. AC, PLC, come on. AC, PLC, Hillsborough, get your library card for free.
Is your local business or organization looking to give back to the community? Help keep our roads clean by joining the Adopt a Road program administered by Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful. Keeping our roads clean is a great way for team building as well as exposure for your business. Select the road your business wants to adopt and dispatch a team to remove litter and debris. Participants will receive 2 signs showing their organization's name as well as safety equipment and instructions for cleaning roads. You can help keep Tampa Bay beautiful by adopting your own road today. To learn more, visit hcflgov.net/cleanhc.
Flossing in the morning is a really great way to keep your teeth healthy and start the day. But when you're through, here's what you do. Throw it in the trash, don't flush it. There's a problem lots of people don't know, called sanitary sewer overflow. A condition buried deep in the ground, inside a pipe where bad clouds are found. It's a problem we can all help solve, so throw it in the trash, don't flush it. Baby wipes, bandages, cotton pads, paper towels, dental floss, clog up bad. Medicines, kitty litter, cotton swabs, hair. Throw them in the trash, don't flush it. It just takes a second to do the right thing, so toss it and let's keep our pipes clean. Throw it in the trash, don't flush it. If it's not toilet paper, don't flush it. Even if it says you can, don't flush it. If you're having any doubts, don't flush it. One more time, don't flush it.
So let's say that Tim here was returning to his vehicle only to find it missing. He may think it was either stolen or towed. Let's not worry too much, Tim. Hillsborough County wants you to know the rules and regulations should you find yourself stuck in this unfortunate situation. Here are a few rules and tips you should know. Rule number 1, permission to tow. Towing services need permission to tow from private property and must post signs with telephone numbers saying that the trespassing vehicles will be removed. If your vehicle is missing, look for a sign and call the number. Rule number 2, communication. As soon as your vehicle is delivered to the local towing facility, towing services must notify local law enforcement within a 30-minute time frame, and they must return calls from vehicle owners within 1 hour. Helpful tip number 1. Law enforcement can help motorists determine if their vehicle has been towed. If you don't see a posted sign, call the authorities on the non-emergency line. Rule number 3. Retrieving your vehicle during a tow. Most people are unaware that you can still retrieve your vehicle while connected to the tow truck. For a drop fee of no more than half the towing rate, the tow truck operator must release the vehicle to its owner. When it comes to payment, tow truck drivers must accept the following: debit, cash, cashier's check, or money order. Rule number 4. Personal property. If the owner is unable to pay the drop fee and their vehicle is in the hands of the towing company, owners still have the right to retrieve personal property from their vehicle. Helpful tip number 2. Having a registration and title in your name will make it easier to recover your vehicle. tow companies will not hand over the vehicle if you are not the registered owner, unless you have an original notarized affidavit signed by the registered vehicle owner. Remember, Hillsborough County is here to help you. For complete, detailed information on towing rules and regulations, please visit us at hcflgov.net/consumer protection or give us a call at 813-635-8316.
Tampa Bay is like no place else.
Wait, you can't recycle the bag? You have to throw it away.
Proper recycling keeps it that way for everyone. Bags tangle in machinery and can bring sorting efforts to a halt.
No bags.
Trash the bags and keep our recycling program moving forward.
No, Mom, look, no plastic bags.
Do your part to keep our recycling bag-free. Trash the tanglers or return them to participating retailers. For more information, visit tampabayrecycles.org.
This is Dave. Dave doesn't know his home's flood zone and was not able to heed flood warnings. Dave and his home are soaked. This is Noah. Noah is an informed citizen. He was warned in advance about potential flooding in his area. Noah took precautions. Noah is dry.
And I saved the animals too.
Good job, Noah. When it comes to flood warnings, be like Noah, not like Dave. For more information, visit hcflgov.net. Be safe, be informed, know your flood zone.
Oh man, here comes Arnie again. Check this out.
It's Arnie.
What are you doing? You made a mess in my hallway.
Hey Arnie, looks like you could use a hand. Let me help.
You don't need superpowers to be a hero. Help make Hillsborough bully-free.
Alexa, play music from The Canoe Crew.
Are you sure?
Come again?
Wouldn't you rather find out what's happening in your community?
Of course, but how can I do that?
Simply say, Alexa, enable Hillsborough County News Flash Briefing, and you'll be ready to go.
Easy peasy.
Yes, Sue, it really is easy peasy.
Alexa, enable Hillsborough County News Flash Briefing.
Hillsborough County News Flash Briefing enabled.
Hello, Hillsborough. These are your headlines.
For your community news, simply say, Alexa, enable Hillsborough County News Flash Briefing.
Hello, Mother. Something smells good.
Good morning, sweetie. I'm making breakfast for you. Can you clean the bacon pan for me?
Sure thing. No, Billy, don't do it. It's bad for your pipes and bad for the environment.
Don't listen to him, Billy. Just pour it down the drain and forget about it. What's a little grease going to do?
Actually, there's a lot that grease can do to damage your home and the environment. Picture this. When you decide to pour fats, oils, or grease down the drain, you are letting those substances harden up and stick to your pipe walls, causing clogs and backups in your home that can eventually lead to expensive repairs, and can also cause gross smells and a nasty situation for your neighborhood and the environment.
You can smell it.
Instead, when the substance cools down, stick it in a plastic container. Make sure the lid is sealed tight and drop it off at your nearest cooking oil recycling station in Hillsborough County. That way, you're helping the environment and saving your family money, so they can buy you that new skateboard you've always wanted.
Right.
It's a win-win for everyone.
New skateboard? Oh, yeah. Your way is definitely better than mine. Let's recycle that grease.
For more information on how you can recycle your fats, oils, or grease, visit hcflgov.net/core.
Welcome to a meeting of your Planning Commission. the official local planning agency for the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. The Planning Commission provides innovative leadership and long-range vision that contributes to the creation of a thriving, prosperous community that offers opportunity, fairness, and choice in how we live, move, learn, work, and play. For more information about the Planning Commission, please call 813-272-5940. Follow us on social media or visit our website at planhillsborough.org.
Welcome to the September 9th, 2019 regular meeting of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. We thank you for attending this meeting. Your comments and participation is encouraged. Please sign the register at the rear of the room and turn off any devices that may be a distraction. If you wish to address the Commission on agenda items, we ask that you please complete the appropriate public comment sign-in sheet at the rear of the room now. When addressing the Commission, please state your name, address, and speak directly into the microphone. For those of you who are not familiar with our process, the meeting will be conducted as follows. The agenda item will be introduced. Staff will give their presentation with a 15-minute time limit. The applicant will be given the opportunity to make a presentation with a 15-minute time limit. Following presentations, members of the public may address the Planning Commission when recognized by the chair. Public comment will be heard for 3 minutes per person. The applicant will be afforded a 3-minute period for rebuttal or response. Planning commissioners will ask questions. Public comment will be closed. Then upon a motion, a second, and discussion, a vote will be taken. With that introduction, I ask that Commissioner Kress lead us in prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, we come before you today with praise for your mighty power and guidance. We thank you for this day and thank you, too, for the many blessings in our lives, for our great country, and for the opportunity to live in freedom. We ask you your blessings on our leaders, and we ask that you give each of us here today the wisdom to make the right choices so that our decisions will be in the best interest of the people of Hillsborough County. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Roll call, please.
Howell. Dix. Green. Yes. Joseph. Kress. Here. Marino. Here. Willman. Here. Thrower. Wilds.
Here.
Dickerson.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Dowdy.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes for the following meetings. Thank you for allowing me. Thank you for that, for allowing me to catch my breath. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign aye. Aye. Any abstentions or disapprovals of those minutes? Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the public comment. If there is anyone who wishes to provide comments on items that are not on the agenda, please approach the podium one at a time and state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, we'll go on to action item, City of Tampa FY20 through FY24 Capital Improvement Program and the Capital Improvement Section Schedule of Project Updates by Mr. Diego Guerrero.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. This item is the Planning Commission's review of City of Tampa's proposed FY20 through FY24 Capital Improvement Program and capital improvement section schedule of projects update. This is an action item and a resolution is provided for your vote. The review was conducted in accordance with Chapter 97-351, which requires the Planning Commission to conduct an annual review of the city's CIP. Chapter 163 requires the schedule of projects that addresses level of service and adopted in the comprehensive plan be updated on an annual basis. The update would replace the existing CIS schedule with the schedule located in your packets. The update is accomplished by ordinance. As such, Planning Commission staff also reviewed the schedule of projects for consistency. The review examined the CIP and the CIS for consistency with the City of Tampa's comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plans of those adjacent communities. Depicted on the screen is a summary of the CIP projects. There are 10 program areas that consist of 132 projects. The total FY20 through FY24 funding amount is approximately $428 million. Depicted on the slide is the same information as provided in the previous slide. However, the percentages are broken out by program area. As you can see, the largest groups in terms of funding are stormwater, water, and wastewater. Projects within the CIS schedule are broken down into 3 categories. Capital improvements objective 1.3 states that projects shall be provided to correct existing deficiencies, replace worn-out facilities, and accommodate desired future growth. As you can see, 91% of the projects address replacement of worn-out facilities and existing deficiencies. Coastal management section objective 1.4 states that public infrastructure and facilities should be limited within the coastal high hazard area. For those projects with available geospatial data, staff utilized GIS to identify 35 projects within the coastal high hazard area. These projects renovate, replace existing infrastructure, enhance recreation areas, or serve to enhance protection from hazards such as the construction and maintenance of seawalls. This would be considered minimal construction and ensures that city property and expenditure is not subject to unnecessary risk. Therefore, the CIP is consistent with the coastal management section objective. Ladies and gentlemen, staff recommends that Planning Commission find the City of Tampa's proposed FY20 through FY24 CIP and CIS schedule of projects consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of Tampa's comprehensive plan. This concludes my presentation. Myself and City of Tampa staff are available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public? Any comments from commissioners? Well, I'll entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that the Commission find the proposed fiscal years 20 to 24 CIP and CIS schedule of projects consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Imagine 2040 comprehensive plan and transmit it to the City of Tampa.
Second.
Did you second? Okay. We thank you, for the motion, Mr. Commissioner Dowdy, and second by Commissioner Crest. Are there any comments? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? None. Thank you. Item 4, City of Temple Terrace, FY20 through FY24 Capital Improvement Program. Presenter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Diego Guerra, Planning Commission staff. This is the Planning Commission's review of City of Temple Terrace's FY20 through FY24 Capital Improvement Program. This is an action item, and a resolution is provided for your vote. As a note, the CIS schedule of projects will be reviewed at a later meeting this fall. The review was conducted in accordance with Chapter 97-351, which requires the Planning Commission conduct an annual review of the city's CIP. Additionally, the review examined the CIP for consistency with the City of Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan, as well as the plans of adjacent communities. jurisdictions. I'm sorry. Depicted on the slide is a summary of the CIP projects. 9 program areas were identified, which consist of 275 projects. The FY20 through FY24 funding is approximately $47.5 million. This slide depicts the same information as the previous slide, with percentages broken out by program area. As you can see, the largest groups in terms of funding are public safety, sewer, transportation, and water. Staff also analyzed the CIP with respect to funding source requirements in the comprehensive plan. Capital Improvement Policy 1.5.5 states that general funds should be used for those facilities with dedicated revenue sources, such as potable water, wastewater, and solid waste. After review of the general fund expenditure, staff found none of these types of projects relied on the general funds. Capital Improvement Policy 1.5.10 and 1.5.11 state that all projects within the 3 years of the city's CIP be funded with committed revenue sources. These include ad valorem taxes, gas taxes, and user charges. Staff reviewed the funding sources and timing and found that the CIP funding was in accordance with these requirements. At this time, staff recommends the Planning Commission find the City of Temple Terrace's proposed FY20 through FY24 CIP consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the City of Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan. This concludes my presentation. I am available for questions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Question. You mentioned that, I'm sorry, can you back up a couple of slides? There was something I was curious about. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
That one. I'm sorry, go back. Yeah, that one. So none of the projects in the capital improvement program are from the general, will be funded from the general fund. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct. None, sir.
Well, not all the capital improvements. Capital improvements that have their own funding, such as water, wastewater, have their own funding.
Right, right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Is anyone for public comment? I'll entertain a motion at this time then.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we find Temple Terrace fiscal year 2024 capital improvement program consistent with the Imagine 2040 Temple Terrace comprehensive plan and forward it on to the City of Temple Terrace for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you for the motion by Commissioner Green, second by Commissioner Dowdy. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by the sign aye. Aye. Are there any oppositions? Thank you. All right, we'll now continue on to action item number 5, Port Tampa Bay permit. Mr. Sean College.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean College, Planning Commission staff. This is Port Tampa Bay permit number 19-009, wharf deck demolition. The purpose of this item, this was transmitted to us by Port Tampa Bay with a request for a consistency determination with the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and that is per Chapters 95-488 and 97-351 of the laws of Florida. Before you is a general overview of where the project's located. That's in the port area near downtown Tampa. This slide gives you a more close view of the wharf in question as part of the project. The existing conditions at this site, this is an active marine industrial shipping area. It is a hardened shoreline, a deep water channel. However, the wharf deck, or a concrete deck supported by concrete pillars at this location, is very old and unstable and is frankly falling down and unsafe. The proposed project would remove this concrete deck and these supports. Some of the concrete, as much as possible, the rebar would be removed. It would make sure there's no exposed rebar, and then that would be reused on site as riprap supporting the existing seawalls at the location. So that's a good reuse of the material there. Considerations for consistency with the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan, that this is an active marine industrial area. This is an existing deep water channel. There are really no environmental resources at this location with regard to it being a deep water area. And there is an ongoing safety concern, so this would correct that safety concern problem. With those considerations, staff would recommend that you issue the resolution in your packet that is a recommendation for consistency with the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and this be forwarded to the port for their consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sean, this is this that diagonal dock area? Is this what they used to call the banana docks? Is that the history of this
I'm
particular
not
one?
familiar personally with that terminology, but we can have
Is
a
that right?
representative is here.
Okay. Okay. I know that probably goes back a while, but I'm dating myself here. Okay, but this action is just to take the deck off, leave the seawall there. And
That's
then,
correct.
And then use the broken up concrete as riprap to stabilize behind the seawall.
Yes, what you have here is you have a seawall, and then actually going out beyond the seawall over the water is a concrete deck that's over the water.
Oh, okay.
And it's supported by concrete pillars.
Okay.
So that part is failing. So
Okay.
that part would be removed,
That's the part's
including the
removed.
pillars, and then after the project, you would just have the seawall that now also would be reinforced with riprap
Okay.
in the water.
So that would essentially widen the actual width of the dock.
In a
that
sense,
removal.
yes.
Okay.
There'd be less overwater. This overwater structure would not be there.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion. Public comment, I'm sorry. Public comment first. Okay, now I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move. I'll make a motion that we find the resolution for Port Tampa Bay permit application number 19009 consistent with the Imagine 2040 City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan and forward it to the recommendation to Port Tampa Bay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we support the plan to move, for the Port Tampa Bay permit on a motion by Commissioner Willman and second by Commissioner Marina. Are there any other comments? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of that motion, would you let me know by the sign aye?
Aye.
Any opposes? Thank you, Mr. College. Item 6 is a consistency finding for the Hillsborough County Public Schools tentative 5-year facilities plan, year 2019 to 20 through 23 to 24. Ms. Krista Kelly.
Thank you.
You're
Krista Kelly, Planning Commission staff. I'm presenting the 5-year facilities plan for the school district. Based on the interlocal agreement between the school board and each of the 4 local governments in Hillsborough County, the Planning Commission is asked to review the district's 5-year facilities plans annually for consistency with the comprehensive plans. The school district's 5-year facilities plan is a work program adopted by the school board to provide an adequate facilities capacity for projected student enrollment. Ms. Amber Dickerson, Growth Management General Manager for Hillsborough County Public Schools, is here to present the proposed 5-year facilities plan and to answer any questions you may have. Following Amber's presentation, Planning Commission staff will provide a recommendation and request an action by the board. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Amber Dickerson with Hillsborough County Schools. We come to you each year to update you on our 5-year plan, so we're back this year, no different than any other. So I will run first step through the projects that we have in the hopper. Robinson High School received an addition and actually opened this August, yay, so it looks great. Good job. Also, high school TTT. So we have our high school site that's located on 672. 672 that's going to open in 2020. We ran into some middle school capacity issues in the area too, because actually the high school site was originally slated for middle school, but then we saw the high school need come online first. So we decided to build the high school first. But we're trying to be more creative on how we use capacity, especially in South County where growth is so rapid. So we're putting a 500-seat middle school in the high school and located in one building where the administrative offices are for a temporary time frame of 3 years. So we're going to put a 6th grade cohort in the building. They're going to move up 7th, 8th, and then they'll be in high school. And at that time, those seats will revert back to high school seats, which we'll need in the area anyway. So this eventually will be a 3,000 capacity high school. New elementary D is located in the Belmont subdivision, also South County. We're actually starting attendance boundary changes this week, Wednesday, if you guys want to come out to another public meeting. We're getting public input on our plan. Tampa Heights Elementary, this was actually a reconstruction, so this is funded by insurance money, formerly known as the Robert E. Lee School. Then we have middle school UU that we have under contract for a new middle school just south or north of Reddick Elementary. Then we have Spoto High School addition that's also in South County. That's to help relieve some development that's in the Spoto Riverview area. Then what else? Year 4, Elementary E, located in Waterset. So we already have that property. We're just basically waiting till we have access to get to our site. And then middle school K-8 conversion in South Tampa. We're still toying with where this would be located, but our issue in South Tampa is that we have a lot of middle school seats and we don't have a lot of elementary seats. So we have a lot of development coming online, and we're toying with the idea of converting some of those middle school seats to elementary to help our needs. Then we have Waimama Elementary Addition, which Waimama Elementary is located where a lot of the new growth is planned to go. So we hope that that helps alleviate some elementary issues. Year 5, that's when we'll be converting the middle school seats to high school seats at high school TTT. And then we'll start collecting funds for a new high school in South County, which always takes a long time. Just to give you a frame of reference, usually we collect around $26 to $29 million a year in impact fees, and a high school is now taking almost $80 million to construct. So it takes several years to accumulate that much money. This is all based on the current impact fee structure. It does not take into consideration a proposed impact fee that is lying out there with the county. They have hired Duncan Associates, a firm, to update their impact fee study, which would basically double the amount of impact fees we get. We've been notified by the county that they're going to explore that in a month or so time frame of moving that forward. Okay, this actually just shows kind of the breakdown in a different format so you know by level what we're doing. And then new schools versus conversions and reconstruction. This is basically consistent with our Tyndall Oliver long-range study of what schools we need in the future. This is not funded. It's in the 10 and 20-year time frame. Okay, this used to be our doom and gloom slide, and I'm happy to report we have a sales tax referendum, so it's not so sad. We have a projected $593 million in the next 5 years. Mainly, all of those funds are being used for our over $1 billion, which was the sad state last year, in deferred maintenance. So they are not going to capacity projects as of now until we can get some of those big projects off of our plate, and we have plenty. Just so you know, though, our local funds are based on local millage, impact fees, CIT funds. We do get a little PICO maintenance from the state and bond revenue. And then we have our major maintenance, our new construction budgets, and then just miscellaneous. And then overall, this is an important point, $49 million is to partially fund the high school in the years beyond, so you can see that adds up. So bus purchases, 20 million, site purchases, 17.5, and 28 million in health and safety. That's just kind of some of our bigger ticket items that we fund. So the whole plan, if you're interested for some light reading, is online, so you can access it here. Also, we plan to take this to our board on October 15th for final approval. There may be some adjustments because we have had a decision made with a new House bill that we have to give additional impact fee credits than we previously did, which is going to decrease the amount of capital funding we have for new schools. So that will be in the final version, which I'll circulate before the approval. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? Commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Amber. Good report is always. It's always interesting to sort of see what the school board is doing. I'm curious though as to because that last list you showed. Can you back up to where you said this is the slide that sort of shows what we're doing? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Maybe one more. We showed all of those. Yeah, that one. Okay.
The long range plan.
Right. So. Maybe I'm answering my own question, but this clearly shows that growth in the county is primarily in South County.
Correct.
Okay, because if we can use these projected school openings, it suggests that this is where the school board at least is anticipating the need for new schools and is anticipating a significant amount of growth.
Correct.
My curiosity has to do with how we at the Planning Commission are sort of aligning or just monitoring those trends, let's say, with what it is we do it from a land use perspective.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Sure. Absolutely. I think that Mr. Sean College is here, who just handled our projections update to look out to 2045, and he's taken a look at the Tyndale Oliver report that Ms. Dickerson referenced and sees a lot of alignment in where we're projecting the growth to go and where they're projecting it to go. One of the things that I was going to mention in my executive director's report is that there was a meeting, I guess it was almost 2 weeks ago, of the 4 local governments and the school board, and they're all wrestling with exactly this issue, that there is a lot of growth happening in the unincorporated area in particular, but also redevelopment in the city, and it's causing service issues for everyone, not just the school district, but in terms of transportation and water and sewer. And are there better ways to grapple and align those plans? So they have, there was consensus from the group that yes, they wanted to keep meeting and keep looking at the ways to address that. Maybe look at, the county needs library sites and the school board needs sites. Are there opportunities to pair more of those up? There's a lot of that's already been done in the county, but with this kind of growth, particularly in South County, we probably need to look for more opportunities like that.
Okay. And I think when we find those opportunities, that certainly puts us in the arena of smart growth when you look at it, especially related to our planning for our schools as well as everything else in the county. So, yeah, good. Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
Thank you. Staff has reviewed the school district's facilities plan for 2019-2020 to 2023 to 2024 and finds the facility plan consistent with the comprehensive plans of Hillsborough County and the cities of Tampa, Temple Terrace, and Plant City. At this time, we recommend approval of or finding the facilities plan consistent and ask for your action.
Thank you. Now is there any public comment? Any questions from commissioners? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. It's okay, you're looking on each other.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to move to find Hillsborough County consistency finding for the public schools tentative 5-year work facilities plan 2019-20 through 23-24, consistent with the future of Hillsborough County comprehensive plan and unincorporated Hillsborough County, Imagine 2040.
Thank you.
That's it. Did I cut it off? Okay. That's all.
Was that it?
Yes.
Okay. Was that a second for you?
I could amend the motion to add that we are finding it consistent also with the Imagine 2040 Plant City Comprehensive Plan, Imagine 20 Tampa Comprehensive Plan, and the Imagine 2040 Temple Terrace Comprehensive Plan for the recommendation to the school board.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for the amendment. And the second would be from, is that your second also? Is that your second in the amendment? You agree to that one? Yes? Okay, all right. All right then. Okay, let's keep it straight. All right, then I'll have, call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, amended motion, would you know by the sign of aye?
Aye.
Are there any oppositions? Thank you very much. Now we're on to item 7. We have a presentation, which is an overview of the 2020 census from the presenter, Terry Egan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Terry Egan, Planning Commission staff. I'm here to give you a kind of an overview, a broad brush overview of where we are in the 2020 census. There's been a lot of stuff in the news about the census, and so I'm going to kind of address a separate part of the census and what we're trying to deal with, which is having to do with some of the undercounts we've had in the past, as well as people not responding to the census. So to start off, everybody knows that why we do a census, right? It's part of our Constitution. It's in the Constitution, and it's used to apportion the U.S. House of Representatives. It's interesting, many countries do a census every 10 years, but they don't have it put in their Constitution the way we do. It was lined up right off the bat when the country was founded to focus on apportionment. But it's not only used for that. It's for fairness. Aspects and data from the census are used for voting rights, housing, and civil rights. And it's about funding. So one of my coworkers pointed out that out of the 2010 census, the household participants accrue $946 in federal funds each year. So it's very important that as many people as possible can participate, because lack of participation is a lack of funds. And this is I think this was in the handout I sent in your packet of how the dollars are distributed in Florida. It's also used for congressional, state, legislative districts. We use them for our population projections. It's used by governments, nonprofits, and as I'm sure you're aware of, every 4 years we sit down and we do the City of Tampa redistricting. So they changed their ordinance their last voting, and now instead of doing it population estimates based on Planning Commission data, it's going to be based on census data. So it's very important that as many people as possible can participate and do participate in the census. This year is going to be different than it has been in prior censuses. It's switched to an almost entirely online response system. There's going to be paper forms, very few. there's going to be your enumerators that are going around following up with people who don't respond. But everything is going to be predicated on an online internet-based response. And this is a kind of a quick timeline of how things are going to break down. You're going to get something in the mail. You're going to get something else in the mail. You're going to get something else in the mail. And then eventually someone from the census is going to come to your house. And if you don't respond then, you're going to get one more item in the mail to respond. If you don't want to, you can call a number and file your response that way. There's going to be, I think, 38 languages available, lots of translation services, but they're really getting away from the paper forms like they had in the past. April 1st is Census Day, and this is the day, the census starts in January in parts of Alaska and other parts of the country, but April 1 is the date of reference. So when you are asked to respond to the census, it's going to be where you normally live and sleep as of April 1. Now we're getting into this part of the presentation. Why aren't people being counted? 1 in 10 of children ages 0 to 4 are not counted. That rate can go up as high as 5% in counties that have a population of over 1 million. There's not a good answer why, but we're trying to go out in the field, in the community, and encourage people and kind of break down some of the myths and stereotypes that people might have about the census. Some of the reasons why people don't respond, they don't have an address, and their address hasn't been picked up by the address canvassers. Right now, there's people who are checking all the addresses to make sure they have an accurate tally of where people live. Householders fail to respond, or they submit a partial response. And these are the hard-to-count populations: communities of color, children under 5, people who don't speak English fluently, LGBTQ, people experiencing homelessness, tribes, rural communities, undocumented immigrants, people with disabilities. These are all the hard-to-reach populations that we're trying to go out and meet with different community groups to kind of break down that barrier so people will participate in the census. And where are the hard-to-count populations on this map, and then also on the inlay of the slide? And there was a map like this in your packet. The darker the color, the lower the response rate. The average was around 73%. So University area, College Hill, Palm River, West Tampa, Brandon, Ruskin, and Waimama, all those areas had low response rates. To increase participation and to kind of go out and get people aware of the census coming and trying to overcome some of these barriers, there's a complete count committee. And the complete count committee is chaired by Commissioner Les Miller, and we have a partnership specialist, someone from the Census Bureau, that comes to these meetings, and we're actually having a meeting right now at another library, where these different subcommittees get together and they brainstorm and come up with ways of going out into the field, meeting with different at-risk groups, places or areas that are not likely to participate, using tools like this map to identify those neighborhoods. So right now, the committee I'm working with is focusing a lot of work on Head Start and getting information in the hands of the children to bring home to the parents ahead of the census. Another coworker is working with the schools to try to get lesson plans in some of the sociology or current affairs classes to make them aware of the census. So the main purpose is to target those specific populations and increase participation rates in the census. And that's it. Questions, comments?
I have one.
Yes.
I work with voting, and I know that some voters who don't have a registered address have a certain number that has been assigned to them, and they're allowed to vote. But they're not counted on the census because there is no permanent address, is that right?
The census has a lot of different ways of attributing your place of residence. So it really just would depend on their situation as to where do they normally live and sleep. Is it, in Brandon, or is it in Ruskin, or are they snowbirds?
So it just depends on the section and not the numbered street address.
I don't know, honestly.
And I'm asking because my voting, where I work is in West Tampa. One of the areas where we know that there are a lot of people who don't have numbered addresses where they sleep every night, buildings where they sleep every night. So that's a concern, and how will the agency work with those kinds of people to make certain that they're counted, is my question.
Well, right now, that's a good question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
You can bring it back.
I can bring it back?
Yes.
Okay. I'll ask.
Okay. 'Cause that's a lot. It's a lot of hours. Any other questions? Sorry.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Terry, how have we done in the past in terms of our population projections and when the census actually occurs? I mean, have we been close to what the census actually confirms in terms of
Yeah, I
population?
believe in 2000 we were under, by a couple thousand people, and in 2010 it was over by a couple thousand people. Usually when you do these small area population estimates at a county, when you don't have like a state to work with, the smaller you go down, you think it would be easier, it gets more difficult. So a county is more difficult to estimate than a state would be. The methodology does not like things like recessions. And when the recession hit in 2007, 2008, it completely blew up the model.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Commissioner.
Maybe I missed it in your presentation, but did you have any sort of thoughts about the 0 to 4 not being counted, or is there
That's a great
some
question.
assumptions out there? Why?
So I went to this really cool panel at the American Library Association, and they had the former president of the census there, and they asked him this question, and he said, any census you take anywhere in the world is going to have an undercount for 0 to 4 people. They don't know why. They don't know why.
Oh, okay. They don't know.
No. Okay.
Okay. There's nothing to vote on. Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting. All right, the next presentation. It's time. Hillsborough survey results. Ms. Silva?
Okay, Lisa Silva, MPO staff. That was a lovely warm-up because we went out and surveyed the community to get their feedback on updating our long-range transportation plan. So you'll see some similar things we struggle with. So I like to do a little drum roll. I'm going to go pretty fast because the really juicy, meaty stuff follows me of like what we're going to put in the plan. But plus, some of you are going to have the privilege of seeing this presentation again. But if I go too fast and you have questions on anything, I am glad to stop and speak more about it. So, great news. We got 5,200 responses in this phase of the outreach. Public transit continued to be a high priority this go around. Just to remind you what we did. So, every 5 years, we're required by federal law to update our long-range transportation plan. It's for a 20 to 25-year horizon, and then it'll be adopted by November 5th of this year. So we went out, and you got to see the lovely results last summer. We had It's Time Tampa Bay, which was a regional survey. So we partnered with Pasco and Pinellas and got input on all of our regional needs for transportation and a higher level. And then we refined and zoomed in to get Hillsborough specific feedback this past summer. And then we're very close to adoption. So what did they say? Last time they were like, oh yes, that transit's important. We want to reduce congestion. Our neighborhoods are important, more better downtowns, hold the line, don't extend out into the rural service area. So got a lot of great feedback on all of our transportation and land use needs. Specifically, bus rapid transit scored very high in the 55%. So we went and drilled down this time to get specific corridors identified in this survey. 81% said regional and local rail and bike walk focus up in the 70s, and then 52% support for water ferries. So you'll see some transit investments prioritized for feedback. Then we've had hours and hours and hours of public input on our controversial downtown interchange. So we had a whole screen dedicated to the alternatives for that. Not to fear, lots of other things are in our plan. These were some of the specific investments that we needed to get some more detail on, but all of our safety and Vision Zero initiatives, the maintenance and keeping our infrastructure in good repair, choices, that's already in the plan, so you didn't see that in our survey. How did we engage everybody and how do we do? Well, our outreach team was very effective at leveraging lots of multimedia. So they did radio broadcasts and kickoffs and had interviews. Our very own executive directors were on the news several times, so they had lots of exposure. Did not have as many big events this time. We didn't have a home show fall within our window. The back to school bashes were starting after we had to wrap up, but we did have Kids Day on July 21st and got great exposure. Yes, that's our logo there on the Jumbotron at Raymond James Stadium. There were 15,000 at that one event. We incentivized again with tickets, but not just one sporting event, all three of our major sporting teams here. So, and then because we always were studying how we did the last time, we knew that social media was our friend. I was a little surprised to find that Facebook is not a fossil. It actually does still very well. We had 85% of our traffic directed from Facebook last time, so we did a very extensive campaign to utilize and design our social media around LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So lots of referrals to our online link. We had 43 events sprinkled throughout the county. We did very much target our communities of concern. Terry did a good job explaining many of those communities, you know, communities with limited English proficiency, the disabled, the elderly, the young, those with zero vehicles, et cetera, were our target audience because we find we have really great participation automatically from the rest of the community, but we fall lower on those. We tried a new technique this time. We said, let's just get transit scoring very high, let's get on the bus. So we partnered with HART and did 9 ride-alongs, and our ride-alongs were through those communities of concern. So we didn't ride every bus route in the county, but we did ride those at least once each. So, all right, so what do they say? Okay, again, I remind it's not a scientific survey, but it is a very effective online engagement tool. We find people enjoy being able to provide feedback at their own pace, in their own home, or wherever they have an electronic device. Here we breaking it down by the numbers, exactly 5,219. Around 90% of people working in the county, 89% of them that provided zip codes were living in the county. The rest live, work, and play or drive through our county. Over 3,000 comments. We're boiling those down and getting the specifics of what the community is saying about each of our projects that we had tested. Here's the representation geographically. I like to squint and see that, like, oh yeah, we did get to every corner of the county. Let's keep in mind some of those census tracts are big in area because they're small in population, so don't read too much into the color coding. Okay, so here we have the census compared to the actual participation. So again, thanks to Terry for warming us up. So you can see the yellow, orange outline is the census population of our county on the various breakdowns by household income. So try as we might, those that with making a little more money are participating at a higher rate, even though we're targeting those other audiences. Here in the race and ethnicity, I'm very pleased to say that when we did Imagine 2040, which was the last 5-year update of our long-range transportation plan as well as the comprehensive plan, that we have increased significantly in our communities of concern. It appears that we've doubled our response rate in those areas. So all that social media blitzing is paying off, and our targeting of those specific zip codes is helping us out to reach those harder to reach areas. Okay, so this was the screen on the bus rapid transit. We had everybody drag and drop their top 5 corridors above the line in order. And this is what they had to say. So you'll see that the orange is the popularity. So sometimes a corridor is being drug and dropped above the line very frequently, but not ranked very high, and vice versa. So US Highway 301, it's not super popular because you see the orange bar lower, but when they drag it above that line, they're saying yes. So I'm guessing people in that zip area are really supportive, versus the Bush-Limbaugh corridor, not so popular and not so ranked so high. So, and then we have some in the middle, like Dale Mabry Highway, that have the reverse effect. So that helps us with our transit partners know where to go, study and do feasibility reviews, and look at our transit-oriented development, et cetera. So then we had this complicated screen of 15 major projects, major investments throughout the county. You had to click on the little colored box. It would pop up the description of the major investments for that area, and you were given the opportunity to say yes, no, or nothing at all. So, and that helped us. And so this is the result. So you see all the yeses are the golden yellow, and they're lined up by response of most positives. So you'll see that reusing our freight rail tracks, very popular, and very little no's on it. So very few blue. The blue is the negatives when they were given no. And then the gray is the frequency of not voting. Plant City, newer, wider roads, is got less yeses, but if you then look at geographically how it scores, you see that, those that are impacted and most familiar with the roads that support the Northeast Master Plan are saying yes, very concentrated golden yellow, so that we know, there's very strong support. It's not very controversial because it's gold. Okay, and this I have this for every project. Not going to take you through every single one, but this was the other one that scored high, and it scored high pretty consistently everywhere because it's kind of dark golden everywhere. So we have those for each project. That helps us when we go out to work on those and work with our partner implementing agencies. This is where we have the downtown interchange. So we, again, are doing this on an online screen and a very complicated project. So we boiled it down to describing them specifically. So we had a no-build option, the safety and quick fix option, and the add express lanes flyover, and then the full rebuild with express lanes. So those were our 4 options. They were asked to give it a star rating, 1 being the least favorable, 5 being the most positive and most favorable. So then I was like, this is a lot of information. So I took little lines and helped to bullet it down. So if you look at it, a lot of times in surveys, you lose people the farther along they get in the survey. They start dropping off, and so you don't have as many frequency of voting. But bizarrely, in this one, it's almost exact because we have like 3,800 responses for all 4 options. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty great. So we have a very good apples to apples here. Then, if you look at the star rating alone, it's like they range from 2 stars to 3.2 stars, 3 stars. I'm like, wow, there's not like real obvious numerical winner either. So you have to look at the bars. So what are the bars telling us? They're telling us even though the no build scored a 2, it has way more frequent 1 stars, and 1 star is giving it the least popular vote. So it has 4 times greater 1-star votes compared to the 5 stars. So we're like, that they want to do something because all the others are doing something with that interchange. So it's looking like the community supports something. So what of the somethings do we see now? And so if you look at the safety quick fix, which is the next option, they're all pretty similar and even there. Kind of a same story, but a little bit different on the express lanes flyover. Again, scoring very similarly. Then you get to the full rebuild, and we have kind of a love-hate situation because the 1s and 5s are outweighing the middle of the road stars. So it's very interesting. Now, when you look at like, okay, where are these people voting, and what does that tell us? And I've got a big version of this, so just like this is kind of at a glance, you're looking at them, you're like, okay, no build. It's got lighter colors in and around the interchange, so not surprising those most impacted were voting a little more favorably on that one. And then, okay, so again, it's a little easier doing it this way. Okay, so here we see down around the interchange, a little lighter blue, but not like real high concentrations of golden, so that's consistent with our bars. I kind of call this the watercolor version because it's not intensely golden yellow and it's not intensely golden or dark blue. It's kind of like, but interestingly, more support in the downtown interchange. So this one's a little more golden than any of the others down around that. So it looks like those communities want maybe some safety quick fixes. Here's the express lane score. So the downtown has, and up north has a little more lower support for this option. The outer county having a bit more support. Here we have some more concentrations of some golden in a couple of areas of the county. More concentration of lower ratings in the downtown neighborhoods. Okay, so then I was going through the summary comments the other day, and I'm like, oh wait, we like to see how effective we're being. So measured our effectiveness. So last summer, which was, I call phase 1, so the It's Time Tampa Bay, the regional one, we had 10 weeks of feedback. 4,000 of those were specific to our county. Over 3,000 in emails that got signed up for our newsletters. 84 events that your staff ran around all over the county to attend. Great intense participation over hundreds of responses, and double the participation from our Hispanic and African American communities compared to Imagine 2040. So then I compare that to how did we do this summer? Well, we had shorter amount of time. We had 8 weeks, more surveys, approximately the same number of emails, feedbacks, half the outreach events, and still consistent participation, and a slight increase in our African American participation even over last summer. So less time and opportunities because we didn't have that trim notice to send us out to every single household, that home show or the school bashes. We used social media more than we used night meetings running around, and we got more and better participation and representation, so yay. All right, so this is all leading up to, we hope by October 1st, but no later than October 5th, we will have the draft plan online on our website. You guys are very familiar with, and the adoption hearing is scheduled for 6 p.m. on November 5th. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Lisa, for this report. Can you go back to the last slide? What happens next? That's what I was most curious about. Okay. So this this goes to the board for full adoption as a...
The plan does? Yes, and you'll be seeing more of what's in the plan in Sarah's presentation next. But the results that we used to help craft the plan, this is the survey that helps inform that effort.
Okay, that's what I was going to...
But the draft, the LRTP, the actual document
okay.
goes to the board November 5th.
Okay, all right.
Not necessarily this presentation.
Maybe that's what I should ask Sarah that question. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Another question for us, for the Planning Commission, okay, this type of survey, this is, and you recall I kept talking about, this is information, this is data coming in, okay, and how do we use it? How do we internalize it, and what does it help either staff or, you know, the planning commission board to do better or to understand better about community sentiments along on these transportation issues. So.
Well, this time the survey is definitely more focused on specific improvements, which many of them will translate into Sarah's presentation about what will be the ingredients into the LRTP. But I do think there's things that can be gleaned from some of the community sentiment, particularly on many of those major projects. For example, I think if we flip back, the roads outside of the urban service area continued not to rate.
That reinforced the sentiments from before when they said, we asked it one way in phase one about extending into our rural areas and neighborhoods, and they were like, it fared one of the worst elements of that survey. This time we put different roadways out in the rural service area, but without an urban service area line, and said, what do you think about these roads being, going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes? And they, also failed.
Yeah,
So there was,
it also provides, I think, the Plant City example is a good one to understand that in their community, they have a different, very specific sentiment about supporting those projects because Plant City wants to see growth in areas like the Northeast Master Plan, the area where they're annexing out along County Line Road. So I think as we drill down into some of these specific projects, yes, we can begin to understand some of the community sentiment about that relates to our land use plans, some of the community plans, things of that nature.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I just want to add too, we had Wade from the MPO staff come present to my neighborhood association, and then I believe Lisa presented also to the West Shore Alliance. But the two questions I have, and this slide is a perfect example, in the way that the interchanges have a number assigned to them, sort of like a score, can that be done for this part and the BRT section where it's like this rate of 3.2 out of 5, or this rate of 65 out of 100? Can that be done for this in the BRT section?
yes, just differently, like not a star rating, but these all have numbers to them. They're just harder to see on the graph here.
Because you mentioned the Plant City one. That to me is a good example of some, that's kind of far away for a lot of people, so they just didn't even rate it. And then the second question was, is there a date in the year in which the survey has to be out by? Because if you're doing this in the summertime, obviously it's a lot harder. So is there a particular time of year that it has to go out, or is there a way to get it out, say like the last 2 weeks of school, for example, so at least it can go home with the parents to kind of kickstart the collection period?
Well, we do ideally try to target better times of year, but we, by federal law, had a hard November 5th date. It has to be adopted, so we can't just say, oh, let's shift it to December so that we can be back and overlap the August school timeframe. Plus, again, I can't just have the results end when Sarah's got to already have the things in the model. And so we take our hard deadlines and back them up. And did I mention there was that summary last year, and we can overlap that? So yeah, there's a lot. So yeah, it's not ideal, but that's how this one fell, this particular 5-year update.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Okay, now we'll have our presentation on the, well, she's there already. Thank you, Sarah. 2014 Needs Assessment for Investment Programs.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. Today I'm going to go through our 2045 Needs Assessment. This is sort of our programs for investment, or what we call funding buckets, that will help build the plan. So as you can see, there's 5 programs here. Those first 4 are sort of our nondescript funding buckets, as we call them. And these are sort of generalized projects. We don't actually have to list them out, specific projects. So that's what we call them, our funding buckets. And then our major projects, this is what we'll look, or I guess we're still considering which projects to be included in this. But as you can see, we have our first program is State of Good Repair and Resiliency. This sort of looks at our pavement, bridge, as well as maintaining the current transit. Our Vision Zero is our safety program. Our Smart Cities is the use of technology. And then our Real Choices When Not Driving looks at trails and expanded transit. So these are the metrics that we looked at when looking at each of these programs that went into sort of the technical analysis behind everything. The State of Good Repair, again, looks at the pavement resurfacing schedules, as well as bridge replacement and rehab. We also have the transit assets, making sure that we can maintain our current bus service. And then this year, we moved the resiliency into the State of Good Repair program, and so looking at how would we recover from a major storm. The Vision Zero looks at total crashes, fatal crashes, as well as serious injury crashes. The Smart Cities, again, this is our use of technology, so we look at travel time reliability as well as delay reduction. And then our Real Choices When Not Driving. This is, again, our transit and trails. So looking at how can we increase accessibility for people and jobs. Pavement infrastructure. So currently, for each of these scenarios that I'm going to go through, I'm going to refer to the trend investment scenario, as well as the trend plus sales tax scenario. So as you can see here, our trend scenario is just that if we continued with our current spending levels, what we'd be able to maintain. And then the trend plus sales tax is with that 1% sales tax divided into these programs, what we'd be able to achieve with that. So for the first one, for our trend scenario, currently on a 17-year resurfacing schedule, we're only allowed to cover about 60% of the roads. And then the actual resurfacing schedule gets drawn out for most roads to about 28 years. With the sales tax scenario, we're able to achieve 100% resurfacing on our major roadways every 17 years. For our bridge preservation, we looked at some of the major bridges and the minor bridges within the county's capital improvement program and sort of use that for our cost estimates. And then with the trend scenario, currently we're able to rehab one major and one minor or replace every year. With the sales tax scenario, we could rehab or replace 3 major bridges and then 11 minor bridges. For our transit assets, again, this is maintaining our current bus service, so not the expansion of what HART is today, but sort of maintaining what they're able to do with their current fleet. Right now with 202 buses, about 10% of them are older than 12 years. 12 years is sort of the life expectancy for a bus. With the trend plus sales tax, we're able to grow that fleet a little bit to 283 and then also maintain 100% on-time replacement with an average bus of actually less than 12 years, reaching 7 years, and then also able to cut the service calls in half. And now we're going to get into resiliency. Currently, 20% of our network is vulnerable to a Category 3 hurricane or high sea level rise, as well as about 11% vulnerable to dramatic flood events. I know in the past few years, we've all seen some crazy storms here and some major flooding within our local roadway network. So looking at those situations. Currently, it's about $46 million spent through the cities and counties' capital improvement programs. With looking at additional funding, we are able to address our highly critical or highly to moderate vulnerable roadways, looking at in between 22 to 72 million per year and additional projects that can be done. With this additional funding, we can look at some of these treatments, raising the road profile, additional ponds, increase or enhance the subbase, as well as vegetation and such. All right, Vision Zero, our safety program. With our current trend spending, we're able to look at about 130 miles of the highest crash corridors through the Vision Zero program. And then through the trend scenario, we're looking at about 15% reduction in major crashes, bike ped, such. Whereas with the trend plus sales tax, we're looking at between 30 to 35% reduction in overall crashes. With the sales tax scenario, we are able to see additional 500 miles in lighting, about 1,400 miles in sidewalk, improved new sidewalks as well as filling in gaps, and then 350 miles of complete streets on the high crash corridors. As for our smart cities, again, this is the use of technology to help intersection improvements, that kind of thing. With the trend scenario, we're looking at about a 10% improvement in travel time, whereas through the sales tax, we're able to address about 220 miles of improved roadways and about 30% improvement to the travel time. These are just some of the treatments that can be included within that scenario. The ones that are bolded there, those are sort of ones that can be looked at for the local roadway networks. So off of the state facilities, so closed caption television, intersection improvements, transit signal prioritization, and loop detection. As for our Trails and Side Paths program, we looked at population and employment density along the corridors and where those can be expanded to, as well as access to our communities of concern, and then also level of traffic stress. I believe that, I'm not sure if we brought that presentation. I thought we did, the multimodal level of service. This was something that the MPO updated about a year or so back, but it looks at reevaluating how we look at our multimodal corridors and bringing those in sort of what's called the level of traffic stress. So looking at how stressful is a bike ped facility to the average or novice user. Through this program, we're in the trend scenario, we can get additional 50 miles of trails and or side paths. Whereas with the plus sales tax scenario, we're able to get 150 new miles in trails and side paths. And this would sort of completely or nearly completely build out our currently proposed trail network. Our transit and paratransit, again, looked at population and density as well as frequency of service. This is based off the current HART Transit Development Plan that was sort of based off the Mission Max, if some of you remember that, which included a reduction in service coverage. So that's why some of the service percentages might be off. But at the same time, HART is going through now with the sales tax and updating their vision plan. Under the current trend scenario, we were looking at 22 existing routes with increased service, whereas through the trend plus sales tax, we're able to get 38 routes with increased service. So these are existing routes with increased frequency. 7 new BRT routes, 5 new local routes, 3 new express routes, the addition of South County and Plant City service, as well as improvements to current transit centers, as well as 3 new transit centers, and then potential for more. As far as the trend scenario, we're looking at about 300 additional miles of service, whereas with the addition of the sales tax scenario, we're looking at 800 additional miles in service, as well as access to half of the population and jobs through the network. All right, so as Lisa said, we're building up the plan towards our adoption date, November 7th. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Johnny presented this at the Little Roadways Committee meeting last month. Okay. I think the presentation is fine, but I do have some concerns, or a concern, and that is if, you know, this is identifying projects for investment, and I guess my concern really has to do with the absence of anything that's related to transit other than HART in this investment program. Lisa just showed in the outreach effort from It's Time Tampa Bay, the sentiment of the community about rail transit. My question is, when are we going to get started? A lot of people that I talk to, are saying, well, yeah, I realize we're under this lawsuit still, but voters voted back in November, of last year, and here we are, we're approaching a year almost, and I'm wondering how is the MPO and how is this agency, how are we preparing ourselves for that? I don't see any, unless I'm missing something. I'm looking for some forward action, whether it's a study, whether it's some initial conceptual overall transit plan. I know there's been some of that work that was done in the past, but it's a new day, and as we're talking about investing, up to 2045. I'm just wondering, when is that going to come into the picture and how?
So the fixed guideway or BRT, bus rapid transit, in its own right-of-way, those are the, bigger ticket item projects, and those are grouped in with our major projects. So there was a separate transit analysis that was done. I was actually supposed to present it at the last policy committee meeting, but got bumped off the schedule because of the meeting going so long. So there is another analysis that has been done, as well as we're refining that major project list that I mentioned at the beginning of what should be included for that. So as far as the transit analysis, we looked at the reuse of the CSX as well as the light rail extension. So those were sort of modeled together, and there is some ridership profiles that we've put together, as well as looking at station activity. And so that's sort of being worked into it. As far as we're sort of highlighting two initial possible routes, but as far as any action to be taken on that further would be up to the HART board. So we've sort of done that initial analysis. We don't want to predict anything that they're going to do at this time. So we are expecting and planning for in our LRTP that we've done this initial analysis. We know a bunch of analysis has been done before. So we're going to let that be up to the HART board. And when they're ready and they have their first alignments they want to move forward on, we'll come back and amend our plan, but right now we're just putting a placeholder for them.
Okay. I'm no transportation engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think I understand that when you're planning a transportation system for a city, a county, or a region, let's say, you have to take in all modes of transportation, all modes of mobility for that matter, and I'm just wondering, clearly the investments that you're showing here focus on bus rapid transit, which is fine. But again, I'm looking further out and trying to understand. Okay, so we're making those decisions now. Well, what about other future transit systems? How will they tie in? Okay, well, we have made decisions now that will be to the detriment or not be, let's say, beneficial, in future decisions about transportation. So
I think what Sarah's saying is that there will be two kind of broad alignments, and correct me if I'm wrong, from downtown to the university and then from downtown to the airport, identified in the long-range transportation plan. It will not be specific whether it is the CSX rail right-of-way or some other specific exact alignment, but it will be broadly identified that we will have premium mass transit in those two corridors.
Okay.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Like it's sort of the placeholder, and then the HART board will ultimately decide what to move forward on first.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Kress?
Sarah, when you were doing your trend scenario and then trend plus sales tax, did you get those estimates by using the percentage breakdown that the voters approved last November?
Yes, we utilize both what the revenue forecasts are for the sales tax, as well as fitting that into each of the programs.
Okay. Okay, and then it's my understanding that there's going to be a workshop at the Board of County Commissioners on, I think, the 18th at 10 o'clock in the morning to reaffirm whether or not those percentages will stay in place. Okay, I know there's a lot of different groups that will be coming to encourage that action. Thank you.
Commissioner Willman?
Thank you. Kind of a follow-up to that. How are you doing the 2045 LRTP needs assessment based on the funding? Are there going to be like two versions, one with the sales tax and one without, or are you just assuming that we're going to have the sales tax as part of that?
We will be listing both the trend scenario, so without the sales tax, and then with the sales tax. That way you can see what you would get with your funding sources.
Okay, and could you just give a little update on where the status of the sales tax is in terms of the county commission actions and the independent
Punt that one to you.
oversight committee?
That was a
Because
lot.
a lot of this depends on that, so.
Well, I'll do my best, and Rich Clarendon's here, so he can jump in if I get something wrong. But as I understand it, the law of the land is that the referendum passed and was upheld with the judge's modifications to it. So, for example, we supported the holding of the first independent oversight committee meeting end of August, and they'll be having their second meeting later this month in preparation for considering each of the local governments and HART's work plans for the 2020 year. That action has been appealed, and Beth came in, so she can answer this even better than I can. This is great. Everyone can tell me how I get it wrong. But that action has been appealed, and that would go to the Supreme Court, and so we're awaiting that. Correct? Or go for it.
Right, that's right. And I'm not sure that I have very much to add to that, really. We are moving forward with the Independent Oversight Committee's review of the agency project plans so that if the Supreme Court does uphold the sales tax, that there won't be any delay in the agencies being able to move forward with those projects.
And I have a follow-up question. So then what actions will the county commission be taking coming up soon? Are you aware of that?
So a couple of things. I think you already mentioned the meeting on the 18th. So the County Commission did take an action last week scheduling, I think it's a public hearing on the 18th to consider an ordinance which would basically codify those percentages of divvying up the sales tax to the different funding buckets. So that action was taken by the County Commission to schedule a public hearing on the ordinance last Thursday, and then the follow-up action will be on the 18th. The County Commission also, of course, will need to take an action to approve its project plan for the sales tax projects. The draft documents from all of the the 4 local governments and HART, who are the 5 implementing agencies. The draft documents that they prepared so far showing what their expenditures would be are all available on our website, which is independentoversight.org, part of the whole Plan Hillsborough system of web pages.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner?
Beth, if you don't mind, as long as we're wading into the weeds.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is there ever been established a definitive answer to the question of should the courts decide or determine that it's unconstitutional, what happens to all the money that's been raised?
I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Are there any more questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now have a presentation from the Transit-Oriented Development and Value Capture. Presenter Jay Collins and some other people.
Good afternoon, staff.
Good afternoon.
Jay Collins with the Planning Commission. Just to continue the conversations that we've been having, where we've been talking about infrastructure, we've been talking about mobility, and we've been talking about what ifs, what this, then that. So let's have one of those what if conversations. You guys will remember some months ago that you actually workshopped the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. What is that? That's 3 counties utilizing the interstate system to move people back and forth between Pasco County, Pinellas County, and through Hillsborough County. Who else is interested in something that would be regional? Well, a regional entity that promotes businesses throughout, such as the Tampa Bay Partnership. So the Tampa Bay Partnership, being regional, looked at that and said, well, we'd like to know a little bit more about that. They're also interested in mobility and transit-oriented development. They then contracted Ms. Taryn Sabia from the University of South Florida to actually look at just that, to look at value capture in transit-oriented development along that line. So thank you very much, and Taryn, take it away.
Thanks, Jay. Good afternoon, commissioners. As Jay said, I'm Taryn Sabia. I'm the director for the Florida Center for Community Design and Research and a faculty member in the School of Architecture and Community Design at USF. I feel really privileged to be with the Florida Center. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, we were founded in 1986 by the Florida legislature to assist the citizens of Florida in creating more livable and sustainable communities. So we do really think that it's a good goal to have. We really believe in that mission, and so looking at studies like this and how we begin to move our community forward, particularly when we get to study our own community, is really exciting. Transit is one of those conversations that is one of my biggest interests and has been for about the past 15 years. So hopefully today what I get to do is put some of those pieces together that everyone's been talking about. You look a lot at land use, you've been hearing transportation, and so this is really that combination of where transportation and land use get to come together and hopefully generate some great things within our community. So we're going to start with a few definitions, and the first is transit-oriented development. So transit-oriented development is that compact, dense, mixed-use development that is near transit. So that's that really key piece, right? That it's near transit, and we'll go through and show you exactly how near we want it to be. And value capture. So value capture is the portion that is harnessed of the value that transit confers on surrounding properties. So typically when we see a transit project announced, properties around that station area tend to gain in value. And so what we want to do is find a way to capture that value, harness it, use it, reinvest it. And so what we've done is looked at several best practices of how it's done. So we've studied a number of communities around the country. These are the ones that we have documented in the study that was provided to you. But we did look at even more than these. These are just the ones that we really could find a lot of great data on. So what we did was we studied best practices. And the best practices were really key because we wanted to better understand how we could go about linking transit-oriented development, value capture, what those two things mean together, and how we would make the most out of it. So looking at how to generate performance-based goals for transit-oriented development, understanding value capture methods and strategies, establishing station area design standards, and this is a key piece, those design components and how they really affect the TOD itself, as well as the value capture, that potential. Defining zoning for TOD and the supporting land use strategies, and then what we did was we took a stab at looking at some of these conceptual TOD locations and putting some of these best practices to work. So when we look at performance-based goals, and we're going to start here because, again, these are goals that typically have metrics tied to them. So we want to see goals be able to achieve certain things that we set forth in a vision, and those vision topics that we felt really shone through and were consistent among many different transit agencies and planning agencies. Typically, there was a partnership between the two. Had to do with supporting a 21st century transit component, advancing equity, providing a mix of uses, leveraging investment, creating healthy communities, establishing affordability within communities, and sustainability as a key focus as well. So looking at San Francisco,
BART really has one of the most robust performance-based set of goals that we found. And they focus on a few things. And one of the things that makes it so robust is they're focusing on value creation, but how that value creation really helps add to a vision for quality of life and using transit as a quality of life definer. And so this is something that they've done really well. Their metrics are pretty outstanding, and they're really looking to achieve their TOD goals. So they really are combining those uses between transit, value capture, and quality of life. When we looked at Los Angeles in terms of their performance-based standards, some of the big impacts that Los Angeles is working on is really beginning to reduce housing and transportation costs combined. And when we look at housing and transportation costs in our counties, we are actually over the national average for both housing and transportation, but significantly transportation. So when we start to look at how we can reduce these costs, Los Angeles is a really great example for reducing them and looking at them in the same pool. So the value capture methods and strategies. We looked at the primary methods, we looked at secondary methods. The primary methods really did focus a lot on the developer fees, special assessments, tax increment financing, joint development. There's a number of communities using these tools. And so we have a couple case studies to be able to show you. And again, these are really about capturing that value that transit confers on sites. So Dallas, Texas is a really great example of a community that's utilized tax increment financing for TOD. It was a partnership between the city and the county. They looked at TOD areas and created a TOD plan that had 4 sub-districts. So the tax increment that they collect can be collected from one district and used in the others. And that's a really key piece. So areas that are high performing can actually help areas that are low performing. They can use it for transit infrastructure, they can use it for transit maintenance, they can use it to expand the system, they can use it for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, for parks, for affordable housing, and they've done all of those things over their 93-mile system, and they've generated more than $10.8 billion in economic development. Yes. Yeah, you want me to go back, Trent?
No, just a question on that. Did you
Yeah.
check to see if we have the ability here for that type of portability of TIF funds?
So currently in the state of Florida, and in the document I go through it, it's documented in there a bit more in terms of what Florida statute allows. Ours is defined under a CRA, so under the community redevelopment areas, and it's typically associated with blight. So one of the things that we would want to look at is statute being allowed to be used for TOD specific districts and being able to use it across a system. And that's the key piece, because the reason Dallas was successful is they were allowed to use it across the system. So it wasn't just a specific geographic boundary of like our CRA where it has to be used within that zone. It was able to be used within a more spread out boundary across the system. Current statute does not allow it to do so unless we have a lawyer that can figure out how to get that wording to work. I don't want to say it's not possible, but
Tracy can figure that one out for us. Thank you.
So one of the, but I would say that with the current model that we have with CRAs, by looking at how we can infuse CRAs with transit-oriented development and how those two things could align, we can use that as a catalyst to really jumpstart. So I wouldn't, discount the CRAs and the current TIF dollars that we have in particular areas, especially since a number of our CRA districts do have those potential future transit corridors. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. So New Quincy, Massachusetts utilized a really interesting method where they were using an assessment district as well as joint development, where they had a developer help fund the public portions of the project, and then they later reimbursed them using the special assessment tax dollars that they had collected. So station area design standards. This graphic is really important. This really does show us that near transit piece. So at the center, within that first quarter mile, that's our most valuable land. It's the area that's right around that station node, and it's typically where we also see the most density. So we want to grow that density at that center core, and then stepping outside of that in that next half mile, this is really, you know, again, still walkable, bikeable, connected to that station node. And as we step out into the further mile, what we see is this is the transit supportive neighborhood. So you will see bus connections, you'll see other types of mobility connections, still biking, and also walkable, because you want these to be able to connect back into that transit center. And when we looked at design standards, we looked at those densities, we looked at the typology of buildings, we looked at the mix of uses, we looked at parking, we looked at a number of different amenities, the programming of these. They were different in terms of how they responded to adjacent neighborhoods or existing fabrics. And so those are key pieces. And again, we have a couple case studies. So one is the Richmond Highway BRT. This is a fixed transit corridor, and one of the key focuses that they had was really trying to keep that pedestrian scale. So they really wanted to have a complete street around this corridor, have everyone be able to connect into it, and really have it have that human-scaled feel. So wide sidewalks, lots of street frontage of buildings. And we see that here as well with the Health Line, and some of you may be familiar with this project. But the Health Line in Cleveland really focused on being context-based. So they wanted to have unique identities around their station areas, and they wanted it to respond to the adjacent neighborhoods. Other key pieces about this is that they thought about function and not technology. And by technology, I mean the mode of transit, right? So it was a BRT, but it was BRT thinking train. And it was really about that function of how the transit moved. And that's a key piece. We want to think about how transit moves. It's not always about specifically whether it's running on a rail or running on a BRT, but really it's about it being fixed, it's about its reliability, and also about its identifiability, right? So how these areas can identify where the transit corridors are. Moving on, we looked at zoning and also land uses. And so the key thing when we looked at zoning is that we were looking for the zoning that could support the goals. So going back to those performance-based metrics, we were looking at how zoning could really be used to help bring those goals forward and help communities achieve those livability standards. So the Pulse Corridor, again, this is Richmond, Virginia, and the zoning here responds to the scale. And again, they brought that scale back out, right? So when we looked at the Richmond Highway BRT project, we were looking at that human scale. They really wanted to focus on it, and they've used their zoning to help emphasize that scale along the corridor. They created priority streets, as well as making sure that they had street-oriented commercial. So these are all elements that they built in order to make a successful transit corridor. This is one of my favorites. I also like this graphic from Arlington because you can see the distinctness with the circles of each of their TOD areas. But you can also see that it emphasizes that quarter mile, which is what we call the 5-minute walk. So that 5-minute walk is the walk that most people are comfortable taking to get to a transit station. And you can see the concentric circle around the exterior, which is going up to about a 10-minute walk, but it really does help emphasize the use within those TOD nodes. And they created 3 different mixed-use typologies that were suitable to their community. And then it was emphasized through their zoning. So Arlington's is a really great example. So for this one of the things that we looked at next was station area typologies. So we went and did a little investigation to see what our 3-county area had in terms of definitions for station area typologies. So we looked at the city of Tampa, we looked at the MPO, we looked at the Planning Commission, we looked at Pinellas County, we looked at Pasco County, FDOT, if I didn't say them already. And how many of you want to bet they were all the same? Yeah, no, they weren't, not one of them. So we went ahead and looked at if from best practices and also by reviewing from around our area what those looked like, and we created definitions that we felt could be unifying for the Tampa Bay region. And so this is a little bit of what they look like, and we have some example images from around the country in terms of kind of giving you a sense of that density or scale. So the first one being the urban center. This would be the city of Tampa, it could be the city of St. Petersburg, but really, again, that very urban, dense place. We looked at mixed-use business districts. This could be Carillon, it could be the new Midtown, West Shore, and wanting to see, you know, again, it's a dense area, there's mixed use going on. They're not necessarily quite as dense as an urban downtown, but they're not too far away. The institutional center, USF, you know, has the potential to really serve as this institutional center, again, adding density, the mix of uses. We're seeing the USF area grow as we speak, adding a grocery store to campus, creating more mixed-use student housing. So we're seeing some of this already begin to take shape at some of the nodal area. Neighborhood centers, looking at this, we have a lot of urban neighborhoods, particularly within the city of Tampa. And so when we look at this, one of the areas that we focused on, and I'll show you one of our example studies, it was in Sulphur Springs at Bird Street and Florida Avenue. But, you know, when we think of this, Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, East Tampa, West Tampa, these are all urban neighborhoods where you can have a mixed-use scale around a center node that focuses around transit. And then the neighborhood center. And so when we get, you know, to the neighborhood, the suburban center. When we look at the suburban center, we're going down in scale a bit, but we're still upping the density around the station node. So within that first quarter mile, we really do want to have a bit more density, still walkable, and give people access to transit. You may see a little more parking in these areas. You're going to see a bit more park and ride situations in these areas, but this does help address those communities as we get a little further out from city centers, and we can look at areas like Hyde Park, Wesley Chapel, and some others. And so as we move forward, we came up with a few questions that we thought it was really important for our community to ask as we begin looking at TOD. And one of the things that I think is important is that as we think about TOD, we should be thinking about it in conjunction with our transit planning. Not one before the other, but rather doing them both simultaneously so that we can adjust and think about those land uses as we're planning for transit in the future and vice versa. So the questions being, have we established goals with measurable outcomes? Again, that goes back to those performance-based metrics. Have we identified priority station areas that maximize return on investment? And thinking about where we can invest is a really key piece because the cheapest property may not get us the biggest return. Have we established zoning for TOD, which leverages value capture opportunities? We really want to make sure that we can leverage as much as possible. And have we created design standards which demand walkable, compact developments that will support transit while expressing the unique identity of our communities so that we don't lose them, but that we really capitalize on those things that make us unique? So we did 3 example areas. We looked at one in Pinellas, one in Hillsborough, and one in Pasco, and 3 of the different typologies. So I'm going to go through these a little quickly just in case you have questions so we can go over them in the end. But we looked at what an overall station could look like and some of its standard components from where we would collect fares and being able to have those digital tickers that tell you the real-time transit and also keeping people cool inside temperature-controlled places, at least at some of our station nodes. So the first one that we're going to take you through is Pinellas County, and this is going to be an example of a business center. So that mixed-use business center, we're looking at Carillon, and you can see some of the things that we were looking at in terms of parcel creation, looking at routes, And one of the key things as we began looking at parcel creation and routes is that even though we were looking at something regional, the importance of connecting to local systems is absolute. So we have to connect to those local systems if we really want to see that value capture and the growth and development take shape, because people need that local circulation, those local circulators and the local service to be able to access jobs, other amenities that they're going to need. So, and here's a view of what we think a build out could look like. And again, these are all conceptual. It was just a matter of being able to get a sense of overall massing so that we could get a better sense of what some of that square footage could look like and how we could begin to transform existing areas throughout our communities. And a street view of what it might feel like. And then this is the Hillsborough example. So our Hillsborough example, again, looks at Bird Street and Florida Avenue. So you can see that 275 is kind of running down the center of the image. We have our quarter mile. And as we begin to look at where those routes are and the parcels, we can start to see how development can take shape. And again, when we looked at the conceptual massing, we can begin to see how we can create a greater and broader network within that existing urban fabric. And so looking at how we connect into that urban fabric is a key piece of being able to see how we can not only create value from something that already exists, but connect into what's there. And again, this is a bit of a street view for it. So you can see we have some areas where you have a load and unload zone. It could be a little bit of a kiss and ride situation. We have wide sidewalks and looking at how we can increase the density around that station node. And then we looked at Pasco. So this is up in the Wesley Chapel area. And again, we looked at what some of the corridors could be for local transit, creating additional parcels, and again, amassing or build out so that we can begin to see how we can infuse new development or increase densities in areas that already exist. And a little bit of what this one looks like. So again, this one has a little bit smaller scale. It's in the suburban area, but yet still walkable for people to be able to utilize the transit within that node. And back to our questions. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Green?
Am I the only one? Okay. Thank you, Taryn. Good report. Good study. It raised a lot of other questions though in terms of, how this agency sort of prepares to address the land use aspect of transit-oriented development, and there are a lot of components to that. The one that I've been ruminating over, pondering more and more, has to do with how do we get to some type of balance in terms of identifying the right densities for for whatever types of mass transit we have at the station areas. How do we calibrate, if I can use that term, the right types of densities, the right levels of densities? We can assume there would likely the real estate market would respond with a number of different types of mixed-use interventions, let's say. But when we look at it from the Planning Commission point of view, and we're saying, okay, that is probably going to be designated as some type of transit-oriented development location or station location, what do we do in terms of sort of trying to figure out, okay, so what types of densities do we allow? Because in most instances, even in the scenarios that here in Hillsborough County that you point to, Taryn, we've got a lot of little parcels, okay, and trying to get them all sort of corralled and say, okay, these are, this is going to be, these are going to be redevelopment. This is going to be a redevelopment area, okay? And then setting those densities for, again, for the real estate market, to respond to what we envision at those locations. That's what I'm really really interested in, because does that suggest that the Planning Commission now starts to look at this from the standpoint of, well, do these areas, would they require some type of special overlay zoning or something like that, or any type of special designation, let's say, or do we just sort of say, well, that's it, let's just sort of wait and see what how the market responds? So I'm just, it's not a question for you, but I think more for our executive director.
Thanks. So in the city of Tampa and unincorporated counties comprehensive plans today, we have a transit-oriented development station area typologies. They're I think sort of aligned, but clearly don't match what Taryn has outlined. And we have in Tampa's plan in particular a floating, it kind of looks like a worm on the vision map. It's not real great because we haven't narrowed down where the transit is going to go, what the alignment is. So we have this kind of big swath, that's a better word than worm, swath on Tampa's map that says within this area, we can land a station area, and within that station area, they would get certain density and intensity bonuses once the station area plan is done. And based on their typology. So we'll do a station area plan for Bird Street. I think there seems to be a lot of conversation about that area. And it would be an urban neighborhood, and they would get a certain level of density and intensity bonus. That's how it's structured in the plan today. And what we have been working on with HART, and I think this work really helps inform what we're about to do with HART, is HART received a grant to look at transit-oriented development, more specifically related to the extension of the streetcar and the bus rapid transit that they're studying along Florida or Nebraska up to Fowler. And so what we're going to do is basically, like you said, calibrate that. We did that work on the transit-oriented development almost 10 years ago. Okay. And in some places, we know, because we've looked at it, we've actually had people come in and do plan amendments to get up to the density that those bonuses allowed. So they're no longer a bonus in some places. In other places, we don't know if that's what the real estate market can bear, or could it bear more or less. We really need to get into some of the station area planning to figure that out and calibrate what the right density and intensity that we give to these areas is. In the plan, it's all written as ranges, anticipating that the station area plans would narrow that. And ultimately, it needs to have zoning that, just like Taryn's slide said, addresses, are we getting what we want out of it? Are we getting not only the urban design and the walkability, but as this study highlights, are we getting the value capture? There's a real opportunity there that I think this raises that I don't think we'd necessarily contemplated in our prior work. So I think we're right on the brink of really getting into this in more depth with those station area plans that would come out of that work with HART. I believe, and Jay can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the RFP for that work is imminent. That's a good word for it. Through HART, and they're hoping to have a consultant selected to work with us on that by November.
Okay. Now, of course, when we look at station locations, or the likely, I should say at this point, the likely place for station locations, and again, I'm just sort of looking at the central part of the county here in Tampa. That's likely to those are likely to land in several CRAs. Okay, so that means now coordination with them as well, because if we are able to do what you talked about earlier in your presentation, in terms of either, combining CRA or TIF funds, for transit-oriented development, that's another area that we're sort of, new to.
Yeah,
so to speak.
I think as Terrence said, isn't something that under the current statute really is contemplated, but I think could open up some really interesting opportunities. Certainly, yeah, the city has a number of CRAs that could benefit from this, but transferring that benefit from one to the other would be
Yeah,
open
it
up
doesn't
some-
fit under the current
Yeah.
model, but you certainly could utilize the CRA dollars for the station nodes within those CRAs.
Right, that's what I'm getting. Not the
Exactly.
portability
Right.
like you were talking about from one district to
Right.
another, but actually using it in that particular CRA itself. So,
Yeah, in having a TOD master plan is one of the things that we recommend within, at the end of the study, right? So that it's not just identifying one or two, but it's really an entire TOD master plan, how they're linked. And if, I don't know how many of you remember, but back in 2007, the MPO had put out a transit plan that actually did identify like nodes and activity centers. And it's one of the only ones that really did this. And it's probably one of my more favorite of our MPO plans because of that. So if you go back and you look at some of those, right, I mean, I think that there are some corridors that we just kind of know are tried and true to the effort. And so I don't, one of the things that I would urge the Planning Commission to look at is, as we're thinking about corridors and we kind of, again, have that swath, right? If we think about where the best investment for TOD is, maybe it narrows the swath, right? So that we really are targeting particular areas so that we can get the most out of what we hope to gain from TOD in terms of setting kind of that quality of life components, both for future development, sustainability, and affordability. Some of these developments may be very significant when we begin to look at resiliency issues, which I'll get to talk to all of you about shortly.
Okay. One last point, because you brought it up, and this is, of course, always going to be a concern. Well, you brought it up within the context of value capture, but you mentioned affordability at these TODs, and I have firsthand experience with two different parts of the country, because I have a nephew that lives at a TOD in Seattle, and I have a son that lives in Quincy Center, and they ain't affordable. Okay. My son is moving in a few weeks from one apartment to another because they're building new housing, but he's paying twice as much for a one-bedroom apartment that I pay for my mortgage. And he's within walking distance of the Quincy Center T station, so that's a big issue. Okay, and none of the TODs that I've looked at, they may have started out affordable, but they ain't today.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
They don't, and again, that inner circle is where you see the highest value, and values typically go up about 20%, right, above what standard market is within that area, and sometimes more depending on the community. So having measures for affordability is key. Again, if we can lower that transportation cost per household, right, it helps balance things out, which is something that San Francisco was looking at overall. So they have metrics that are built in specifically for affordability. And then when you look at the Los Angeles example, they're looking at those combined costs of housing and transportation and how they can build that in to the way in which they're designing their TODs. So those are key things that they are thinking about as they go through the process of creating policies and zoning and design standards for those transit-oriented developments.
Okay, thank you. But a lot for us to think about. Okay, because this comes with a lot A lot of unique challenges.
Okay. Commissioner Dickinson.
So when you speak of incentives, it's always basically density. Are there any other creative incentives for developers to do more high density that you've seen in the projects you're researching?
Yeah, so with the value capture pieces, you can really use the idea of value capture for bonuses in a way, right? So joint development is one. Sometimes land swaps. They utilize land if it's government-owned land. So there are different mechanisms that can be used in terms of creating those partnerships for the developers.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kress?
Thanks. Great information, and I understand your client on this is a Tampa Bay partnership. I see Dave Sobush over there. I wondered if there's, I think you're done now, right? So is there a clearer next step with this? Is this just kind of trying to raise awareness and get collaboration and coordination and people thinking about ideas?
So in terms of the study with the Tampa Bay Partnership, so we've concluded the study, and so what we've been working to do now is kind of get the study out into the community. So that's where we are right now. And then, next steps, I guess we'll see kind of what happens within our communities as things start to progress, whether it's with Hillsborough and looking at what happens with the tax, looking at what some of the next planning efforts are with HART. One of the things that isn't completely clear with the RFP that HART is going to have out. It is not required that they look at necessarily the market analysis or value capture as part of that. It's not one of the requirements that's coming with those funds. But it is something that I think would be a missed opportunity if we didn't look at that with that study.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jay's coming back right now. He's done? Okay. All right, we're on item 11, Hillsborough County Plan Amendments. We'll start with letter A, 8C CPA 19-03, Future Land Use Map Amendment. Krista Kelly?
Thank you. Krista Kelly, Planning Commission staff. To start out with, I'm going to give you some background. This map shows that I'm going to be presenting the first three plan amendments, 1903, 4, and 5, because they're in close proximity to each other along Kingsway Road. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's put this back on here. Okay, let me try again. And so I'm going to start with 1903. You can see it's on the west side of Kingsway Road. This is a location map, and again, you can see that all three amendments are clustered in the northern part of the county, in the Thona-Tasassa area. 1903 fronts on the west side of Kingsway Road. It is in the rural service area. The aerial shows the site as primarily agricultural in use, as is the surrounding area, pretty much in all directions. It consists of 5 parcels. It's a privately initiated map amendment, and it totals 109 acres. On the left-hand side, you see the adopted future land use map showing the property currently designated agricultural rural 1 to 5. To the west of the site, some of the areas designated residential 1 and agricultural estates 1 to 2.5. To the east and north and south, it's pretty much agricultural rural 1 to 5. The applicant's requesting a change to residential 1, which you can see on the right-hand side in the proposed future land use map. The impact of this change, basically it would increase the number of dwelling units from 21 units to 109 dwelling units. The site does not meet locational criteria, therefore non-residential uses are not generally required unless there were some unique circumstances which there does not appear to be. The next site is 1904. Now you can see this is on the east side of Kingsway Road. The site is also in the rural service area. It's south of Thonatasassa Road. And it's pretty much directly across from 1903. Again, it's a privately initiated amendment consisting of 15 parcels and totaling 315 acres. It too is primarily agricultural in use. On the left, you see the adopted future land use map showing the site and all the parcels designated agricultural rural 1 to 5, as are the surrounding area. The applicant in this case is also requesting residential 1, as you can see on the right-hand side, proposed future land use map. Again, the impact of this change would be to increase the number of dwelling units. In this case, 63 dwelling units to 315 dwelling units. And it too does not meet locational criteria. And finally, 1905, this is a smaller portion or a smaller parcel on the west side of Kingsway Road adjacent to Plan Amendment 1903. The location map again shows, it's very hard to see, but along that cluster. And again, it is adjacent to 1903 in the rural service area. It too is a privately initiated map amendment. It's the smallest of the three, 24.9 acres, and is agricultural in use, as is the surrounding area. Identical to the other plan amendments, it's currently designated agricultural 1 to 5, as is the surrounding area, and this applicant too is requesting a change to residential 1. Okay, the impact would be an increase in dwelling units from 4 units to 24 units, and it too does not meet locational criteria. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about all 3 of these plan amendments.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Commissioner? Commissioner Diggs?
Thank you. So all 3 are adjacent parcels, but it sounds as if you were suggesting that they're being initiated by different entities. And not that it really makes any difference, but I'm just kind of curious if they're different entities, how all that came about where it's all happening all at the same time for all identical situations.
It's difficult for me to answer why it's being presented in 3 standalone plan amendments. These are 3 groups of different property owners. They do share a common agent, and he may be able to answer in more detail why they're coming in not as 1 project area but as 3. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll have HCCPA 19-06, Future Land Use Map Amendment. Mr. Augustine.
Commissioners, good afternoon. Will Augustine, Planning Commission staff. The next agenda item before you is Hillsborough County's Comprehensive Plan Amendment 1906 briefing. This plan amendment is located in north central Hillsborough County along Highway 92, just west of Plant City. The subject site is a privately initiated map amendment in north central Hillsborough County, which is approximately 3.4 acres in size. The aerial shows that the surrounding area is predominantly single-family homes. Land use of residential 1 and residential 2 predominate the area. The subject property is south of Lynn Oaks Circle and Highway 92 intersection. McIntosh Road is to the west. Branch Forbes Road is to the east, and this subject site is in the rural service area. The site has an adopted residential 1 land use classification. The area south of Highway 92 is residential 1. The area north of Highway 92 is residential 2. Residential 2 and residential 1 are the predominant land uses for the surrounding property. The applicant is requesting a suburban mixed-use 6 land use classification change in order to allow a currently operating commercial engine repair shop. The currently adopted land use classification of residential 1 allows a maximum of 3 dwelling units on the 3.4 acre site. Suburban scale neighborhood commercial, office, or multi-purpose projects are limited to 110,000 square feet or a floor area ratio of 0.25. With a land use change to suburban mixed-use 6, the subject site would have a potential build-out of up to 18 dwelling units. In suburban scale neighborhood commercial, office, or multi-purpose projects would be limited to 175,000 square feet or a floor area ratio of 0.25. This site does not qualify for locational criteria. This briefing, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Didn't see any lights on. Commissioner Dowdy?
Actually, yeah, well, did you infer that this was is it a legal nonconforming use that it's trying to repair?
Well, he has a code compliance issue he's dealing with right now.
That this request would resolve?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. And now we'll hear HC CPA 19-07, Future Land Use Map Amendment to Vallow Hills Neighborhood. Ms. Mills?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Unica Mills, Planning Commission staff. The next amendment for your review is HC CPA 1907 to Vallow Hills Neighborhood. This is a privately initiated plan amendment that is being brought forth by a group of homeowners. The site is located within the southeastern portion of Hillsborough County. The site is located within the urban service area. It's located within the Garden Estates of the Brandon Community Planning Area. The site totals 50 parcels, and they total an acreage of a little over 55 acres. And the request before you this evening is to change the future land use designation from residential 4 to residential 2, which is essentially a down plan. Here is an aerial of the site. The predominant area is single-family uses. We do have Chimino Elementary School, which is centrally located to the site. There are a few commercial parcels located northeast along Lithia Pinecrest here. I would like to point out with this amendment, there are a few parcels directly adjacent to the proposal that are not a part of this plan amendment. There's one left out here. There's one here as well as here. It's kind of hard to see from the thick line, but those are not a part of the plan amendment. Here is another aerial, a zoomed out version that gives you some more context as to how far the site is from the urban service area bounding and the rural area. Again, currently the future land use designation of the site is residential 4. Other land use designations that we have in the area are public, quasi-public, which is Chimino Elementary School. Residential 2 is located here. We have some natural preservation located here. And again, the proposal is to change the future land use designation to residential 2. Impacts of the site. Currently, the site could develop up to 223 dwelling units. If the site were to be approved, the dwelling units that would decrease down to 111 units. Again, this would be a down plan. Neither residential 4 or residential 2 would permit non-residential uses, being that the site does not meet commercial locational criteria. This concludes my presentation. There is no action required on your part today. These amendments will be back before you to be presented at an October 14th public hearing. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
We'll start with Commissioner Dix.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I have this correct with the map. If this were to be adopted, does that kind of, in essence, kind of create two enclaves, kind of residential 4 in the middle of newly residential 2s?
That's correct.
And is that, it seems odd to my way of thinking, but is that normally done? Would that be a common occurrence?
Because the site is located within the urban service area, no, that's not normal.
And so those two landowners, for whatever reason, just chose not to participate?
Yes, that's correct.
Actually, 3 or
3.
4. Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks.
You don't need to. Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Yanika. This is a new one, as they say, or quite different. I wasn't quite sure what I was looking at in your maps. I didn't get a chance to go on Google Earth and actually take a look at this area. But what's the existing conditions there now? And I mean, they're actually houses there.
That is correct. On the sites, there are single-family houses. That is correct.
Okay, so they've been sort of, is it fair to say, all of these houses have been assembled as one parcel, or what's actually going on? That's what I'm curious about.
They're not actually assembled as one parcel. These property owners all came together, and they have one applicant from the same neighborhood that's representing them. They're not assembled as one parcel.
Okay.
They're built as their neighborhood got built as these large lot residential parcels, and they are concerned about the fact that they have 4-unit per acre allowance in the comprehensive plan and don't want to see properties split up into 4 units per acre. So they're asking to go down to 2 units per acre.
So they don't want somebody to come in and do either a small multifamily building or subdivide the property and start doing smaller lot houses, single-family houses. Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay.
And as I think we'll get into at the public hearing, while it's in the urban service area, the area currently is not on central water and sewer, which is why it has the larger lots, because you have to have a larger lot if you have a septic tank. So that's how it's gotten built this way, is because of the requirements related to them being on septic tanks.
Okay, all right. We'll see.
Interesting.
Look forward to the staff report on this.
Thank you. Executive Director, Mrs. Zornita.
Good afternoon, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director. I'll try to be brief, given that we still have a workshop in between this and our public hearing. But at your seats, you should find my report. I'll mention a couple of things. At the August 13th Board of County Commissioners land use meeting, they made a request for us to look at the land use category, the Waimama Village 2 land use category. I think I had previously mentioned that we had been engaging with some folks in the Waimama community who wanted to look at an update to their community plan. We think those two efforts to look at that land use category and update their community plan will sync together nicely because they sort of work together. So we'll be working on that and looking to engage some consultant support on that project. Specifically, some of the requirements of that land use category look at a number of economic and market related assumptions. And so we'd like to retain somebody to look at those and see how they need to be updated. This plan was done in 2005, and so some of the assumptions related to square footages for commercial and employment uses have changed, we anticipate. As I mentioned, 2 weeks ago, we had the joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners, the 3 cities, and the school board. What I didn't mention in that is that the county administration has asked us to work with the consultant who was brought in town to bring back a scope of services that would look at doing essentially a community assessment of where our assets are, then subsequently what the needs are and how to better align those in a plan. And so we're going to be working with them as sort of the neutral party in this, because we're not one of the 4 local governments, we're not the school district. So looking at how we can help them bring forward a scope that meets all 5 of those entities' needs. And again, looking at this as sort of a longer term solution to those growth projections for not only schools, but other community facilities that will be needed over time. The 2 weeks ago Thursday, that was 2 weeks ago Wednesday, but 2 weeks ago Thursday, City Council made a motion to request that the planning, they requested from the Planning Commission an amount of $50,000 to $100,000 for development of neighborhood commercial district plans. So I am working with staff and Mr. Robin on a response to them about how we might be able to help them with neighborhood commercial district plans and how that might align with other planning efforts that are ongoing, such as the transit-oriented development station area plans, some of the neighborhood planning that has the city has been working through, and how we might be able to work with them on that in the coming year. There's a motion on tomorrow's BOCC land use meeting asking us to look at the RP2 land use category, and both us and Development Services, because that has code requirements as well. I anticipate that we'll be asked to do that tomorrow, so that'll be another study on our list of things to do. Our work program's getting bigger, so it's a good thing though. It's all things that sort of are bubbling at the surface from all the growth, and particularly in South County, and then the redevelopment in the city of Tampa. So those are 2 things that we definitely need to get in there and tackle. So we're happy to do that. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we have 4 planning commissioners who are up for reappointment, or their positions will be vacated, I'm not sure which, in every instance. And so we're going to reschedule the retreat that we had scheduled for September 30th until all of those appointments are made. Unfortunately, the schedule that the city and the county are on right now for doing that, they probably will not get made until the very end of the month or early October. So I would remind those who are in those seats that you are a planning commissioner until the new one is appointed. So we may need you to come to the October meeting so that we have a quorum. We'll work with your calendars on a new date once we have those appointments made. And that's all I've got for today. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Now we have other business. Chair's business. This chair doesn't have any business. Oh, is there any old business from anyone? New business? Committee reports? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I'll be real quick about it to talk about the Hillsborough River Board Interlocal Planning Board and Technical Advisory Council meeting. One item of interest, we had a presentation from Ross Dickerson from ELAP on his strategic acquisitions map and the duties and responsibilities of ELAP, which are large. But what I found very interesting was the strategic acquisitions that they are targeting to try to maintain, environmental lands protection, but also to try to create some or finalize and finish a green corridor basically in Hillsborough County to allow not just preservation of the lands themselves, but a place for our animals to be able to migrate through the county safely. So I thought that was rather interesting, and we may hear more later.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Madam Chair, the MPO board meeting was, of course, canceled last week because of the impending storm.
Okay.
But thank you. No.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you all. We'll adjourn until the, how much time do we have in between? We have a workshop.
Yeah, so if you want to get some food and then go into the Pine Hillsborough room, that'd be great.
Okay. You heard that plan. It's a mad dash. That's it. Meeting adjourned.